Welcome back, everybody. My name is David Whitmore. The other voice that you will hear is Joseph Whitmore. And this is a podcast about the second part of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Couple disclaimers up front. We're not historians. This is a non rehearsed conversation. And we're hoping that it is going to be at least mostly true and somewhat funny. We're moving on from part one of Eleanor of Aquitaine. And this is one of those where you might want to go back and listen to the first part because we covered a lot of ground there. And she's worth it. So if you get a chance, go back and listen to part one. Especially go back to minute 25 and 52 seconds where we discovered that the Mormons were part of the Second Crusade. Just kidding. All right, so now we're at Eleanor, part two, and her marriage has been annulled from Louis VII because they were some sort of cousins, and she marries in 1152. She's 30 years old. First of all, a correction from last time. We got a little bit too ambitious with her youth. When she was on the Second Crusade, she was actually closer to 25 years old. So some time had passed. But now she's 30, and she marries Henry. And we begin to learn about the house of the Plantagenets, which just sounds evil to begin with. It's just like, and I know Henry II wasn't the worst king of England. That was credit goes to King John or somebody, but he wasn't.
His son, yeah.
Was that his son?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, from Eleanor.
Oh my God. So anyway, well, that's perfect because he was almost the worst king, and his son was the worst king. He couldn't keep it together. I guess we could start at any time now, but just a couple points that I wanted to make sure we hit on was that he killed Thomas Becket by mistake. His knights got it wrong, and he killed this important person in the church. His family ends up revolting against him, Eleanor plus her sons. He ends up whipping himself literally back into shape. And that's how he wins back the people. So if we can sum all that up in 15 to 20 minutes, that would be awesome. And I guess we start at the marriage, or where do you want to start?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So basically, after Eleanor got back, I mean, consider a woman who actually goes on a friggin' crusade and marries the King of England by the time before she's 30. You think that's a pretty accomplished life, right? Like,
sure.
What does part do?
Really? She should have just quit right there.
My God, Eleanor, what else do you got? What else do you got in store for us? But when she got back to Paris, right, she actually met with Henry's father, Godfrey, right? And we think, or I think, that when she was meeting with him, he was called Joffrey the Handsome. So I think originally she had dibs on him. She wanted to marry him, right? Get out of Louis. But he said, I got this kid, right? Maybe you can marry him eventually. My little son Henry, who's like 10 years younger than Eleanor. So I think things were pretty much. She was planning things as soon as she got back to Paris. She was looking for a way out.
Sure.
If it wasn't Joffrey, it was going to be Joffrey's kid, who was like 10 years younger than him. And sure. She was 10 years younger than the father. So it could have gone either way, right?
Yeah. So he was 10 years.
Hoping for the father.
Yeah, Henry II was 10 years younger than Eleanor when they got married. Yep.
Yeah, and he was like, so she was in her, I don't know, she was 30, she was in late 20s, he was in his mid-teens. But she turned out that she probably liked that better. Because as soon as she got the divorce from Louis VII, because of Consuet Coligny, she, 2 months later, less than 2 months later, she was married to Henry II.
Yep.
So it's not like I don't think it was a spontaneous love affair. I think she had this all planned as soon as she got back.
Sure, she did.
From Paris.
She didn't want to have the Pope watch her have sex anymore.
Copulate Louis one more time.
Yeah.
Right?
She's all, the
That was
Pope?
enough.
I don't know. I'm pretty freaky, but with the Pope watching, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think Henry was very. I mean, he was a teenager, and he was probably very. I mean, Godfrey, his father was actually called Godfrey the Handsome. So these are good-looking bloodline, and he would have long red hair. He was athletic. He was exciting, and he was happy to have Eleanor because he wasn't they originally met, got married. He wasn't that into ruling. He was still a teenager, and he was still wanting to do teenager things. So, and Eleanor was still very beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So, for the first 15 years of their life, matter of fact, in the first 8 years, they had 8 kids.
Yeah.
So, it's not like what was going on with Louis, where it took like 16 years to get 2 kids, right?
Yeah.
Because they could only, they could only copulate on certain days of the week, maybe when the Pope was supervising. So they got busy. They had a lot of kids, including John, famous King John of the Robin Hood mythology, and Richard the Lionhearted. And Viola, she actually married one of her daughters to Louis's kid. So
I was going to ask you one thing.
He keeps it in the family.
I was going to ask you one thing real quick. We talked about Eleanor's little sister and how she was in a war with the Count of Champagne. Does she ever surface again, or is she just kind of out of history?
I think I haven't heard anything about her than Champagne. I guess I think she really loved that old guy. She was like 13, 14, and she married a 51-year-old Duke of Champagne, and I guess she liked champagne. And they just partook of the bubbly for I never heard from her again.
So it's kind of interesting.
Champagne hadn't been admitted yet, but it was still the Count of Champagne.
Right. So it's interesting that characters come in and out of history, and they're still alive, but nothing is written about them. And this is kind of what happens to Eleanor, because Eleanor definitely comes back into the fray of things. But when she's just having baby after baby after baby, King Henry II becomes the king. And it's something that he will never let go of. He's just like, I'm going to be the king no matter what. And it was weird because he didn't have any competition from outside. He didn't really have a lot of competition with the church, even after he kills one of their main dudes. His competition came from his own family. He couldn't keep a lid on his family. Like
I think initially he was okay with Eleanor having a power play because he was too busy being a kid. But you're right. After the 8 kids, and he was now in his 30s, not his 30s, in his 20s, he goes, I'm tired of Eleanor. And his mother died, and at that time, he said, okay, I'm ready. I'm tired of women controlling my life, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Matilda's gone. And he said, Eleanor, why don't you just go down and rule Aquitaine again? I'll just send you off there. And then this is where Louis comes in again, because Louis has a daughter, Alice, right? And not from Eleanor, from his third wife, right? He has more daughters, I guess. He has another son called Philip, but he sends the daughter.
He kept the Pope busy.
Yeah, he kept the Pope busy. Yeah, but when the Pope learned, thought it was always daughters.
Right.
But he sends Alice up to London to be married to Richard the Lionhearted.
Right.
And at this very same time, Richard the Lionhearted and Philip Augustus, his actual son, are having an affair.
Well,
right?
there you go.
So he's not. So Alice goes up to London. Richard the Lionhearted isn't even there, and Henry takes Alice as his mistress because And then he sends Eleanor, who's like, what? God, like, going on in her 40s, and he sends her down to Aquitaine to rule, and she's glad to get rid of him, right?
Yeah.
So her and Richard go down to Aquitaine. Richard becomes Duke of Aquitaine.
Yep.
And they pretty much are, Richard's her best friend, not only her son, it's really her best friend, because, I mean, he's handsome, he's flamboyant, he's gay, and she can just, she's like totally Aquitaine material, right?
Right.
And so they're like ruling peacefully, and that's when Henry, he says, was it William? Yeah, because his son dies, but William.
It gets complicated. It gets really complicated. There's a family revolt, but before we get into the details of that, which are really way too complicated to even try to understand, we can just get to the summary of it. But at this point, the Plantagenets, the Eleanor, they stop becoming great people and they become the Kardashians. They're just now they're famous for being famous, and it's all about them. From here on out, it's the wars are between themselves. It's like, what about the people? There was the Prince of Transylvania one time said, when leaders go mad, their people suffer. So I'm thinking their people were probably suffering when these people were not doing anything. They're not fighting a crusade. They're not helping their people. They're fighting with themselves, and they're famous for being famous. They haven't done anything honorable since Eleanor got there.
I think Eleanor's ruling her Aquitaine. Like she likes Aquitaine, but yeah, generally Europe as a whole is probably going to hell in a handbasket. But the funny thing is, it wasn't the war thing that's going on, right? She gets together with Philip, who's the son of Henry VII, her first husband, right? To rebel against her current husband with her two sons, right?
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that she actually, right. So she gets together with Philip, the son of her first husband, with John and Richard to fight against Henry. And that's when Henry comes down and says, forget this, I'm taking Eleanor captive. So he comes and captures Eleanor and holds her prisoner for 15 years.
Right.
That's when that happened. That's the 15 years of imprisonment. Right. She had to go up in London to live in the Tower of London or somewhere and just write letters to people.
Yeah.
But he still let her write letters. So that was a bad thing to do. He should have taken her pin away.
Yeah, she wasn't really a prisoner. She wasn't like getting whipped and going on the rack. She had her ladies in waiting there while she was in prison, I'm certain.
And writing all these letters to all her kids and grandkids and great-grandkids to manipulate them and turn them against Henry, right? So he wasn't controlling her as much as maybe he thought he was.
And what's weird is one of them dies of tuberculosis or something, but they forgive each other at some point. They're like, okay, it's kind of... But can we talk a little bit about where Henry II, he's losing the people... No, he's lost his family. They're rebelling against him. And he accidentally has his knights kill this guy named Thomas Becket.
Thomas Becket, yeah.
And then after that, he loses the people. And he's like, oh, crap. I can get my family back, but this is going to have to wait a little bit because I got to get the people back. And he stages this dramatic thing where he goes like dressed as like a peasant, and he walks through the streets, and he gets in the church, and he's beating himself.
Yeah, because not only did he get excommunicated, which is normal, right? Kings are always getting excommunicated. But the Pope put all of England under interdict, which means nobody could get baptized, right? Nobody could have communion. No one could die with their last sacraments, right? So it's like, this was before the Protestant Reformation, so there wasn't, you couldn't like go, I'll just become a Lutheran. There were no Lutherans, right? There was only one church. So if the Pope put you under interdict, you were screwed. You were going to hell. And all your babies being born without being sprinkled, right? and they died in childbirth, they were going to be suffering forever. So, yeah, it pissed a lot of people off. But this was not, I mean, it sounds stupid to us, right? Well, not all of us, some of us, it sounds stupid. But they believed it, right? They believed that if you didn't, sprinkle a baby when it was born and it died, then it was going to hell and suffer forever. So it put a lot of there. So, yeah, of course they were pissed off. And the only way he could get out of it was to do this great display of flagellating himself in the church.
That's right, flagellate himself. I wanted to say that word. So what if it hadn't worked? How did he know?
The defenestration.
How did he know that was going to work?
Well, I mean, what option did he have? I think, I don't think the Pope wanted to send all of English babies to perpetual hell, right? Oh, but you can still, I think you can still buy Thomas and Becket's blood. It's pretty diluted now, but when he died in the church, all the peasants ran in and tore him up and got pieces of his skin, and they put little vials of his blood, and then they sold the vials of the blood, and they kept diluting it over the years. But I guess you can still go there and get it looks like water now, but apparently it's just diluted Thomas and Becket blood, and apparently it still has miracles because it's not a quantity thing. As long as you have one RNA strand of Becket's blood.
That's ridiculous. All right, well, so we got to say something about who this guy was, Thomas Becket. So, from what I gather, he was a good friend of Henry II. They were best buddies, and he didn't really have much to do with the church. But then Henry II puts him in a high position in the church, thinking that he's going to go along with all Henry II's ideas and stuff, and he doesn't. And then from that point, they become these arch enemies. But that was weird, because was Thomas Becket even a priest before this? I think he was just his buddy. He was just like some guy.
They grew up together.
So he wasn't.
Together. I think Thomas Becket was poor, and Henry II, he was like his companion to get into trouble with when they were young. And,
but he wasn't loyal to him.
But once he turned him into the bishop or Archbishop of Canterbury, I think Thomas had a come to Jesus moment, literally.
Right.
And so he started taking it seriously. So sort of like Trump trying to load the Supreme Court, and then these Supreme Court judges don't rule in his favor, right? It's like
that happens a lot of times.
Like that.
A lot of times presidents will pick a liberal or conservative judge, and they don't vote that way because they're freaking judges and they have integrity. But anyway, what I was going to say is that it was the Canterbury, you said, right?
Archbishop of Canterbury.
Canterbury. That was the cathedral where Henry does this dramatic display, right? He goes into the Canterbury.
He has to walk down the street barefoot and whipping himself, and then
so you could still go to that church today.
It's still there. It's still Archbishop of Canterbury. It's still the head of the English Church. Yeah, the Anglican Church. It's still there. Yeah. I think I was there once. But
did you whip yourself with a?
No, I was looking where I could find some vials of a Becket's blood out front, in the souvenir shop. But
well, you know what? I still think that he's like Henry II. I don't know. I can't find anything that I'm going, wow, this guy's a really cool, honorable, talented. I just don't see it anywhere in him. Compared to Eleanor's, the family she came from. Well, I guess we could talk about Richard the Lionheart, but I don't think that he was that great either. He was a great warrior.
Both Henry and Richard deserve their own podcast, especially Henry. I mean, Richard in the Lionheart and against Sultan would be a great story.
Yeah, but even then, he gets sick and has to delay the battle, and Suleiman's has to send him food to get better and stuff.
Exactly.
It's like, what? Is that what you're known for? Nah, I don't like him. I don't like him. I don't like the Plantagenets. I don't like that name. It just sounds like evil people. Plantagenets. You know, he's speaking like giant white hair or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, well, the Plantagenets
They
stayed
had rule
around
for like 300
through
years.
the War of the Roses, like
Yeah.
350. The first, the uh, until Henry the Seventh and Henry the Eighth came
Yeah.
along with the what do you call them? Not the stewards,
The
but I
Tudors.
forgot.
Tudors.
The Tudors, yeah, the Tudors. So it was the Plantagenets all the way up to the Tudors, which was
Well, when
quite a
we
bit
get
later.
to Henry VIII, that's going to be fun.
So Henry II started the Plantagenets, and John and Richard the Lionhearted were his heirs, and then he goes all the way up until the War of the Roses. So yeah, they lasted a while.
Yeah.
But after, so Henry VIII, what happens? Henry VIII has a war with his sons and Philip, and he ends up losing that war to his son, and Philip dies, and then Richard becomes king, right? And Eleanor loves that because Eleanor is Richard's favorite son, so they become basically mother and son of England, and Richard doesn't give a shit, so he takes off to the Holy Land to fight with Saladin, who he really likes. I mean,
Yeah.
he really likes Saladin, right? They're fighting all the time, but Saladin's a really cool guy, right? He's not going to kick you when you're down. If you go face to face with him, he'll beat the shit out of you, but if you fall down, once
Well, you know,
Richard fell off his horse, lost his sword, and Saladin came up, brought him a new horse, gave him his own sword, and he got another sword for himself, and said, "Okay, we go," and they start fighting again.
well, yeah,
So,
but that one time when I
Saladin
was
was a real gentleman. I mean,
right.
everybody loves Saladin, even when he's killing you.
Well, that
And
one
that's why
story
Richard lost that war.
when I was mentioned that where he Richard got sick and Solomon sent him food to help him get better and waited for him to get better to
Yeah.
fight the war. That wasn't such a good idea because when Richard got better, he kicked his ass. He won the next battle, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't it?
but he ended up losing the whole thing.
He lost the
Right?
whole thing.
He didn't get Jerusalem. He went back to France. I mean, and was because for one thing, Richard didn't like England, right? Oh, other thing about Henry II, once he died, right, in the battle, so I'm getting confused. So Richard goes back. Richard and John and Eleanor and Philip fight Henry, right? Henry dies, and Richard becomes king. And Richard, I guess, I don't know what happened. So Richard becomes king, and they're ruling together. And then after Richard comes back, he gets in a battle with one of his underlings. He's besieging this city, and this little kid on the fort keeps shooting arrows at him, right? And Richard goes like, just forget it. You're never gonna get me. It's a little kid shooting arrows at Richard, right? And one day Richard is walking across the court without any armor, and this little kid gets up again, and Richard actually is looking at him, and the little kid gets the arrow and shoots him and actually hits him this time, right? And just like pure fluke. And Richard looks at him and like gives him the thumb up. He says, "Good job, dude. You finally got me." And then he keeled over and died. So I don't know. Richard was pretty cool. I mean, even when he got killed by this little kid, he looked at the kid in the eye and said, "Yeah, good job. You got me. This is it. After 20 tries, you got me, but I'm done." And
Right.
then so I think the best part to end on Eleanor is that now Richard, her favorite, who's like, he is intelligent, he's handsome, he's gallant, he's funny, he's literate, and John's a fucking moron, right? So John's the only male son left. And what's funny is that Eleanor's grandson, Arthur, who's like, I think the son of Henry's earlier son that died, he thinks he should become king because he's like the grandson, right, of the guy who should have been king. And he's fighting, so he gets a rebellion against John, who wants to be king, and Eleanor, John is like hopeless, right? So John is fighting Eleanor's son, her last son, is fighting her grandson. And she sides with her son because they're closer, right? And she actually leads the battle. because Richard's army is still in the field, so she gets Richard's army. She dresses in armor. She's 80. She's like 80 years old now.
Eleanor?
And she gets Eleanor. She's like 80 now, or in her late 70s, and she gets on armor and leads John's army to fight her grandson. I mean, what a way to end a career, right? You see a 79-year-old lady leading an army to fight her own grandson so she could put her moron son on the throne. And but she does. She beats her grandkid, who dies. Her grandson dies in this battle. She puts John on the throne, and I think she didn't want Arthur, who's the grandson, because he's too intelligent, too young, and too energetic, and she wouldn't get a chance to rule, right? So she puts John on the throne, and she sort of takes over the throne again, right? And John doesn't know what he's doing, but John messes up. He keeps messing up, and then finally there's a war, and she goes back to to her nunnery, and she dies when she's like 82 or something, right?
All right.
But yeah, up until, I mean, what a way to end.
No, that's cool. That was a great way to end. But still, you still haven't convinced me that the Plantagenets were nothing more than a bunch of freaking Kardashians. They didn't do anything. They didn't. They fought themselves. That's all.
Well, the only thing good about the Plantagenets was not their successes, but their failures, right? John was such a failure that he ended up signing the Magna Carta, which is the beginning of all democracy, right?
Well, there you go.
They were successful in their failure. Because
Well,
after
good.
that, it became a constitutional monarchy, which France never was, right? That's why France ended up having the French Revolution.
Ah.
Mr. Guillotine, right? England never did because of John's failure. Maybe if Eleanor had backed Arthur, right, the grandson.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
And they wouldn't have had their Magna Carta, and we would have had our own Mr. Guillotine. I don't know what he would have been, something else, but we probably would have come up with something better.
Right, and that eventually led to the royalty letting the people rule themselves in a sense with their own courts and their own judicial systems and all that.
Yeah, but it was certainly a failure in terms of kingship, right?
Yeah. So
John couldn't hold it together.
Yeah, because they, I don't know. I think it was like, I can't believe they lasted so much.
That lasted so long.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I believe it because I think Eleanor could have married somebody better. She should have married Solomon.
Could have married Solomon. Solomon the Magnificent. That was later. You mean Saladin.
Saladin.
Actually, there are rumors that she had an affair with Saladin when she was in Antioch with Raymond. Of course, Saladin was only like 10 years old then, so maybe she manned him, right? She got.
So I think that the Muslim culture was so sophisticated. It was almost like the height of what was going on over there. But I don't want to get too sidetracked. We're coming on 30 minutes, so let's go ahead and end this one. And then next week, please tune in because we're going to do. How do you pronounce her name?
Boudica from England, the warrior princess in England who beat the shit out of the Romans.
That's right, Boudica. All right.
Boudica, yeah, she. Everybody's got to love her, and if you haven't heard of her, look her up. We're gonna reintroduce her to the modern world as she should have been never forgotten.
Well, apparently they wrote a bunch of stuff about her, so we'll see. Thank you, guys. All right, bye for now.
Okay, adios.
Oh, wrong one.